This is Keys to the Shop, Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Danny and Michelle Quiroz of Reserva Coffee Roasters in McAllen, Texas. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I am your host for this show, and always thrilled to have you along. You know, I respect your time and your choice to tune into this show. It really does mean a lot to me. So thank you truly. And I would be grateful if you'd subscribe to the show. That way you always get updated with new episodes as they come out. Also share these episodes with your friends, with your team, especially on social media. Just let people know Keys to the Shop is available to help coffee professionals around the world truly thrive. So thank you very much, everybody, for doing that. Now, I want to let you know, of course, about Keys to the Shop Consulting. This is where I get to work with you one-on-one to help coach you through anything that you happen to be going through in your coffee bar. Or maybe you are starting a coffee shop and you need some guidance in that process. I'm working with people in both categories to really help you build something beautiful and profitable at the same time. So you get joy from operating a successful coffee shop, whether that's, again, starting your first business or you have an existing coffee shop or shops and are looking to elevate the culture, to solve some problems, to scale responsibly, to refine it. I mean, there's lots of things we can work on. I've just got back from an on-site assessment with a client. I'm on my way to another one in California very shortly, and then another one in Minneapolis. And so this is something that I love doing because, you know, when you get boots on the ground watching what's happening in the cafe, it really makes a big difference for coming up with a custom plan of action and prioritization for how coaching is going to go afterwards. And so if coaching and consultation is something that you've been thinking about, and maybe you've even heard me talking about it on the show before, reach out and let's have a conversation. All you need to do is email chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS@keystotheshop.com. And we'll set up a free discovery call and talk all about it. So can't wait to talk to you. And again, that email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, one of the most rewarding experiences in coffee is when somebody really has this transformational experience drinking your coffee and you see it happen. We want to multiply those experiences for people. It's not only good for business, it's good for coffee, and it's good for people too, you know? And equipment like the ground control Cyclops brewer from Voga Coffee helps make those experiences more common in your coffee shop. With the ground control Cyclops brewer, they invented SCA award-winning technology that allows the ground control to extract an incredible depth and range of flavor in your coffee that puts you in the driver's seat of elevating that batch brew experience. But it's not just a batch brewer. It also makes tea, batch-sized lattes, batch cold brew. So it opens up more profitability for your shop and better workflow as well. So check them out at groundcontrol.coffee for more information. I do think if you're looking to elevate your coffee quality, introduce new levels of profitability in the shop with better range of flavor and experience for your customer, then you really need to be thinking about getting a ground control Cyclops brewer in your shop. Check them out again over at groundcontrol.coffee. As a longtime barista myself, one of the things I know that's important is the minute differences between something that is okay and something that is great. And if I can get my hands on a product that is great and count on it every single time, then it makes my job easier and I look forward to it and my customers are happier. When you're talking about plant-based beverages, you want to go with something that is designed with the end user in mind and for their customers. And then we're talking about the Barista Series from Pacific. The Barista Series is a line of plant-based performance beverages designed for baristas and approved by some of the best baristas around the world because it stands up to the heat from steaming, creates awesome texture, and keeps the flavor balance focused on the coffee for every beverage. So I would encourage you to get samples and try it for yourself. To do that, just visit their website, pacificfoodservice.com. And when you go to pacificfoodservice.com, have them send you those samples and you'll see, you'll taste it. You have your baristas taste it. This makes a huge difference for customer satisfaction. So if you're looking for the best product for your plant-based menu, I would definitely recommend checking out the Barista Series from Pacific. Okay, everyone. Well, today we're talking with two people that I consider friends. These are people who I actually got to do a little bit of work with as a consultant way back in the day when Keys to the Shop was first starting. We're talking with Danny and Michelle Quiroz of Reserva Coffee Roasters in McAllen, Texas. I'm so impressed with what they've been able to accomplish over these years. From their first store that I was fortunate enough to get to visit to now 4 stores in a thriving wholesale and roasting business. I'm just so impressed with them and their ability to be detail-oriented and people-oriented at the same time. Wonderful coffee, just wonderful people. So a little bit about these two. Danny is a dedicated entrepreneur and coffee enthusiast. He earned his Bachelor of Business Administration from the University of Texas Pan American. He spent 18 transformative years at GE Aviation, now known as GE Aerospace. And there, Danny held various roles of increasing responsibility from IT project manager to human resources leader, equipping him with a lot of experience and business acumen that obviously is going to come in handy for something like coffee. In 2015, Danny discovered his passion for coffee and co-founded with his wife, Michelle, Reserva Coffee Roasters, initially experimenting with coffee roasting in his kitchen and then learning to appreciate the subtleties of the craft. He developed a roasting style designed to balance natural attributes with the coffee's origin with a familiar taste of coffee that people love. After 2 years as a roastery only, in 2017, the dream became reality when they opened up Reserva Coffee Roasters specialty coffee shop in McAllen, Texas. Now, Michelle Quiroz is an accomplished engineer, a business leader, and coffee connoisseur. Her professional journey began when she earned a full-ride scholarship from NASA and spent a summer at NASA's Glenn Research Center in Cleveland. She went on to graduate with a Master of Science in Engineering Management from the University of Texas Pan American. And beyond her business endeavors, Michelle has been a board member of the United Way since 2020, and she's completed the SBA's Emerging Leaders Program in 2021. Michelle continues to push boundaries in the coffee industry with her passion, dedication, and keen business acumen, making significant contributions to her community and beyond. Both Danny and Michelle, in the founding, running, and expansion of Reserva Coffee Roasters, have been recognized for their work by being named the Lower Rio Grande Valley Small Business Persons of the Year in 2020. And so a lot has gone into Reserva Coffee Roasters. A lot of business experience and coffee passion mixed together has created this magic. And I am really happy to get to sit down and talk about this company and have Danny and Michelle tell it in their own words, from the first iteration to the first store and beyond, all of the lessons that they've learned. And I know you're going to get a lot from this conversation. So let's get right to it now. Here now is my Founder Friday interview with Danny and Michelle Quiroz of Reserva Coffee Roasters in McAllen, Texas. All right, Michelle and Danny, welcome to Keys to the Shop. How are you?
Thank you. We're doing great.
Thank you. You're doing well. Good to be here.
Yeah, excellent to have you. As I mentioned before we started recording, I've known you all for a little bit. You were one of my first clients back in the day, back when you were, what was it, like 6 months that you had been open at that point, 2017?
Yeah, we opened in late 2017, and I think at the early start of 2018 is when we said, hey, I think we need some help here. We should get some, just kind of like a separate set of eyes to look at our operation and see what we could be doing better. Because, we had no coffee experience. We would never been in the industry. So prior to that, I think, just having you as a resource available to us really helped us see what, we were missing.
It was really interesting getting, you say, an extra set of eyes on, when I got to your place, it was so impressive. I mean, like you said, you don't have that coffee experience going into opening a cafe in the roastery and roasting your own coffee. But what you had as the start of your business was really nice. It was really good. And so it was awesome to see. As I feel like that's a good place to start is, what were you doing before coffee and why did coffee catch you in its clutches and drag you in?
For us, we had a very long journey in coffee. I remember, like, being the Starbucks user, going every several times a week, purchasing coffee on my way to work. And I remember one time back in like 2004 or so, I ended up walking out with an espresso machine at a Starbucks and thinking, hey, I can just make my own coffee at home. So great. I can, not have to, like, get up early to go do my coffee runs and stuff. So for me, it just became like a natural part of my morning routine. And, we had that machine for like over 10 years, even before we started our coffee journey. So it was just something we naturally gravitated to, drinking coffee at home, exploring coffees, different coffee roasts. I think we would order like the Kona pea berries back in like 2005. After our Hawaii trip, we went over and we found some coffees out in Hawaii and Maui, and we would just like order them kind of every few months because they were quite expensive still at that time. But yeah, it was just it's kind of funny. We laugh about it was expensive. I think we paid like $13 a pound back then, and it was like expensive coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that the seed was planted back then because so my cousin was married in Maui, and we went to the wedding, and we saw a coffee company out there that actually would franchise. And so the seed was planted then. We didn't have the money, but we were like, wow, we could really, like, if we could just bring this coffee company, back to our region, that would be awesome. But we didn't have the money to do that. This was 2004.
Mm-hmm.
But the seed was planted. And so we kind of went into our careers. Michelle started with Motorola, then she switched over to GE. I had been working for GE since 2001. And so I did 18 years at GE, half in IT as a project manager and half as a human resources leader. Michelle had various roles at GE as well.
Mostly in engineering and management. So I think from a business perspective, we felt like we had a good amount of knowledge in terms of the mechanics of running a business. We actually thought about opening up a company at some point in 2015, and we just didn't know what that was going to be, right? So we started brainstorming on, hey, what are our interests? What do we like? Is there anything that is missing in our region? And, we said, hey, we've always loved coffee. We don't see a huge coffee scene in this area. Let's bring it down.
You're entrepreneurial in nature, working for a larger company, doing some pretty high level work, and that passion for coffee, it met the entrepreneurial itch to do something. And now you're looking at, well, what does it look like to start our own coffee bar, our own coffee roastery, I suppose? I mean, was it one and the same that you wanted to open a roastery and coffee shop at once? How did that start?
No, we originally just bought a roaster, and our plan was just to do a side hustle, keeping our corporate jobs and selling our coffee at farmers markets, at events on the weekends. And one of the biggest questions we kept getting asked is, hey, where's your coffee shop? And we just didn't have an answer for that. We're like, hey, we just roast coffee. So I think after several events, we started thinking about, hey, it might be a good idea to like explore if our customers are asking for coffee shops. Maybe we should try to understand, does it make sense for us to go for it? And we did.
So let me just kind of focus in on this roasting a little bit, because up until this point, you'd been making coffee at home on a Starbucks machine that you bought, home machine, and you're exploring Hawaiian coffees and maybe some other coffees as well, right? Just as a consumer. But then to roast coffee is a different thing altogether. How did you go about taking, yes, you have experience with people, with management, with project management. As an aside, I thought it was really cool that I walked in and I think, Michelle, you had set up a Kanban board for tasks, which is like a TPS, a Toyota Production System, like lean.
Oh, yeah. We brought in all the lean manufacturing of a Kanban and T-bin system so we don't run out of ingredients.
Exactly. So there's all those assets there, but then there's the knowledge of coffee to roast it. And buying the roasting equipment, like what was that learning curve like when you started roasting?
We purchased a course by Willem Boot of Boot Coffee out in California. So we methodically went through that course, learned how to roast by sensory milestones, manual roast logging, pencil and paper. And so that was kind of our introduction to roasting, essentially, was that course. And then just, buying Scott Rayo's first book, Coffee Roasters Companion, reading that, taking notes. And so we just tried to learn in a traditional way is through other people and their resources. And then obviously trial and error. So, roasting our coffee and then tasting it. But I mean, in all honesty, you don't really know how to taste coffee when you start roasting it. Just because you're roasting doesn't mean you know how to taste it. Everything at that point is so one dimensional, like coffee tastes like coffee. It's not until you have those first encounters with coffees who have flavor notes that are so obvious that you can't miss them. And you're like, and then that
Yes.
piques your curiosity. And those are typically the African coffees that have those obvious flavor notes that it's like, okay, something's different here. I don't know what it is. It doesn't taste like anything I'm familiar with, but, I want to investigate it further. And then one of the other things that we had to do was start drinking our coffee black, because at that point, when we first started roasting, we were still putting milk and sugar and, doctoring up coffee because,
That's how we drank coffee.
That's how we drank coffee. It was.
Oh, sure.
And so we're roasters now. We need to drink our coffee black. And so that's what we started doing. And it was like a 2-week withdrawal process that we went through.
Did not know I was addicted to sugar.
Did not know we were addicted to cream and sugar. But those are just things they have to do. So just consuming a ton of information, trial and error, tasting our coffee black.
And then we ordered several coffees from around the world too, just bringing them in and calibrating our palate.
Calibrating our palate was a big one. Ordering coffees, signing up for every service, every single coffee box service, getting coffee delivered from, different roasters around the country, and then tasting them to understand where we are and how they're different, and trying to reach that level of quality.
That's smart. All that you just described sounds rigorous, and calibrating yourself against roasters that you respect and plugging yourself into these ecosystems of quality and learning from people who have got so much wisdom. It's really obviously a great move. And I'm sure you saw some pretty good results from that in the cup. And at the same time, as you're tasting the coffee, then there's the customers tasting the coffee, and you're at farmers markets, but then, the coffee shop adds another layer of feedback to how coffee is perceived. So as you are dialing in your roasting process, what role did feedback from people you serve both at the farmers market and then actually at your coffee shop play in taking you to the next level?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of our ratios really came from the feedback that customers were giving us we would do home and garden shows. We'd be selling our bags of coffee. We'd be giving out samples. And at these shows, I mean, you could give up to 1,500 samples. And so you're constantly getting feedback from them. And so I would say our ratios were really kind of honed, from the feedback that we were getting at these home and garden shows and didn't matter what the show was. If they let us sell coffee, we sell it. So whether it was like a hunting show or a home and garden show or any type of, holiday show,
September 16th, the Mexican Independence Day show. I think we went there and
Fiesta, some sort of, Fiesta de Palomas, like different shows. We would sell our coffee. We would experiment with different things like coffee lemonades and things like that, giving out samples and just introducing people to our coffee, our brand. And we were receiving a lot of questions about where's your coffee shop? Where's your coffee shop? And I would say those shows were great for marketing. You about break even on the show, because it's very expensive for the booth and for everything that you need to buy and the preparation and the cost of goods. We broke even on those, but it's great marketing and it's great for feedback. So essentially you could get feedback for free on your coffee and continue to hone it and refine it, that sort of thing. So took a lot from those shows.
The idea of honing your craft and making the coffee, adjusting it to taste and, keeping it according to what is really good. And you take it with a grain of salt. Somebody might tell you that you should roast this coffee or that coffee, but it doesn't always translate to you saying, oh, absolutely, because you said so, I will. It's a theme, people will say, I really love this, or something about this I don't quite love. So that matriculates into the changes that you make in the coffee and the roasting. But all the while, it's the coffee as the product, right? And people's experience of it. But when you open a coffee shop, there's a lot more to consider. It's the experience that goes along with it, which is its own product in a way. So what was when you decided, okay, well, people keep telling us, and I guess it's true, maybe we should have a coffee shop. What does the coffee shop for Reserva look like in your minds at this point? What was the vision and goal for the retail expression of what you had been doing with roasting?
Our interpretation was, if somebody's going to come to our coffee shop, they're going to want to eat, and they're going to want to eat something savory, something sweet. And so I genuinely enjoy cooking, baking, making like food preparations at home. And so I kind of just dug up through my favorite recipes, kind of say, hey, what do I like to enjoy at cafes, and what is not available in our region, to build a food menu so it can complement our coffee offering. So, in our vision, we envisioned customers going for morning meetings, having some breakfast, going in for an after lunch beverage, or even in the evenings wanting to go on a date and get a dessert. And so we had a variety of food items that can be paired with our coffee offering. So we're not just known as a coffee shop, they can go in and enjoy the cafe throughout the day.
I would say that, when we were looking at the experience that we wanted to offer, we wanted an accessible location is what we were looking for. We wanted people to have, a nice aesthetic build out to enjoy their coffee in, some bumping music in the background. Even though they come in, they have their headphones on, like, there's something going on in the background to drown out some of the conversations that are happening, that sort of thing. And obviously your product and your service. So, we focused on having music in the background, some bumping music going, location. And so those were the things that we like prioritized really in our minds, were all those things.
And this is stuff that you enjoy from coffee shops that you've been to. I'm imagining that there's sort of like a vision that you've accumulated as customers of cafes, right?
Yeah, so while I was working at GE, I got a chance to travel all over the world, in Europe and Asia. And so, part of my excursions out in these cities in Scotland and Amsterdam, over in Singapore, it's just hitting up coffee shops. And so there was just so much out there that, I felt like I was missing out in the Rio Grande Valley. It's like, hey, we could bring some of this down and introduce a different aspect of a cafe environment.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, your aesthetic is unique amongst coffee shops. First large scale sign, the Reserva sign, or the coffee, remind me, it's coffee is happiness.
Yes, coffee's happiness. That's, yeah.
Up in neon on the top.
Bright neons on top of our ceiling.
As big as you. Yeah, the letter is like as big as a traffic light,
Yep.
And that was unique. And the idea also of this space is it's a destination. I mean, at this point, I don't, it's been since 2018 that I have, been down there. But when you were first open, you were one of only a few or couple businesses in a development that was still under construction, which presents its own challenges. I think a lot of listeners are maybe curious to know how you navigated that, at least maybe even getting over the initial fear that there's nobody else here drawing traffic to our cafe. What was that like, being one of the anchor businesses for a development?
I would say that we almost made a huge mistake on that first cafe location. We were actually looking at a location in the same plaza, but in the interior of the plaza. And so we were not going to be visible from the road. That could have been a really, really bad mistake because, as a coffee shop, you get a ton of traffic in the morning. And so luckily we heard about these plans that the developer had about this plaza right on one of the main roads. We signed up, to have a space in that spot. So yeah, it could have gone wrong. So we were actually really happy to be there, and we just wanted to open our coffee shop. We were kind of, we weren't really thinking too much about, hey, we're going to have to anchor this thing. We were just, we were thinking about the same thing as how do we get traffic in here, whether we're the anchor or, whether we're the only ones there or whether we're one of, 5 or 6 businesses that are in the same plaza, we were just
So focused on trying to
focused on trying
open.
to get traffic and trying to open and get traffic in the doors. I think it was all.
I think it was the excitement of just starting the new cafe journey. And, I think in hindsight, it's kind of funny. I'll try not to open a cafe in a brand new building anymore. I don't want to be the first to build and enter because of our neighbors might be breaking concrete and
I mean, the
chiseling through
smells,
the
yeah,
smell. Yeah,
the
the
solvents,
solvents of floor
the
paint, so it's like, hey, how about we are like the last people to go into that plaza now or, go into an established location.
yeah, that was the biggest challenge was just the solvents and the banging and the construction and the rattling and the whole nine. Like it was an
It was an
adventure.
adventure. Remember, one of our neighbors broke concrete like 3 times. They did some bad plumbing work initially, and they had to fix it, and they fixed it, I think, twice after that. And just hearing the saw cutting the concrete, right? And we're trying to explain to customer, "Hey, I'm so sorry," or our neighbors are doing some work. I think that was a very challenging part of growing and building a new brand, right? And so how do you explain to a customer that, hey, that noise is not associated with me, but please be patient, we'll take care of you,
Or they
right?
have to shut off the power at a certain time of the day, in order to do their work or whatever it is.
It sounds just harrowing. There's a missed opportunity here to have some kind of a
What not to do,
entrepreneurial
right?
ASMR station that just plays construction sounds of your name.
Yeah, and everything with your first coffee shop, it's kind of like your first child where, you're like everything is like you're living and dying with every little decision or everything that happens. Eventually you kind of mellow out, but everything is just amplified because, you're looking at it like, hey, this is my entire livelihood is in these 4 walls, and you're trying to make it work, and then you've got these statistics that are saying statistically you're not going to make it, so you have all of these things that you're thinking about, and then so at the time it's everything, and you're just focused in on trying to make customers comfortable in your space.
So let me ask about the food and coffee and what you decided to open with when you did initially open. What did the food look like? What did the drink look like? And how did people receive Reserva as a retail establishment?
When we initially opened, one of the kind of our selling points was, hey, we're going to make everything from scratch. We're going to make it all in the kitchen. We're going to prepare it, heat it, serve it, and stuff. So that went really well for quite a few years. And then, once we got to the, hey, we're going to expand, how are we going to duplicate this process? That turned out to be a bit challenging for us. And so we had to really kind of relook at our food menu and say, hey, what makes sense to keep in-house? Where should we outsource to a bakery to bring in just to facilitate the growth strategy for us?
And I would say from a coffee standpoint, Michelle had designed some drinks, looking at, our region, we knew we were going to have, some drinks with, honey in them, mocha and so on. And so Michelle architected those. And then my philosophy was I'm going to try to perfect the bean so that the foundation of everything that Michelle creates and puts on her menu, at least the foundation is perfect, and then we'll build quality ingredients there on top of that. And so that was and it's still my philosophy is I'll perfect the bean, whether it's right now we have our espresso blend is a Guatemala Antigua and a Colombian Sierra Nevada single origin coffees blended together, and that's our medium to dark roast, and that's the one that gets your larger total addressable market from a coffee standpoint. And then we always had an Ethiopian coffee on pour over, but then I introduced an Ethiopian espresso light roasted, and I switched those out seasonally. Right now, we're on Ethiopia Durato Bombe, Ethiopian espresso. It's beautiful. Little by little, I'm trying to bring the region into a point where, they're exploring flavor notes of coffee through espresso as well as filter coffee. And so it's been a little journey, and it's always been my plan. My plan is always to have a variety of espresso, a variety of cold brew, even several of my shops, and 3 of my 4 shops, I have a light roasted Ethiopian espresso, a cold brew, and I have our Guatemalan medium to dark cold brew as well. We have our V60 pour over, Chemex pour over, AeroPress. I just ordered the AeroPress XL because I want to offer larger AeroPresses.
The 8 ounce isn't a big
I had
enough.
no idea that was a thing.
Yeah.
Just came out last week.
It just came out, and I was like, you know what? The whole reason I stopped drinking AeroPress was because I needed more than 8 ounces of coffee. And I know that you can brew a concentrate and then you can cut it with water, but I never wanted to do that. I always felt like that was like cheating, even though, they win AeroPress championships with those recipes. But yeah, so that sort of thing. So, one thing is we've been pushing the envelope with light roast espresso, with light roast cold brew, and continuing to push what we believe, which is giving customers a variety that doesn't allow them to ever get bored. That's always been my fear, is like the customer is going to get bored of that one coffee and not have anywhere to go, because we feel like customers come to us because they're bored of wherever they were going. And so they're having an adventure within Reserva, but we need to continue that adventure through seasonal coffees. And so anywhere where I can stick, our light roasted Ethiopian coffees, light roasted Panamanian coffees, Colombian coffees, anywhere I can put them, I'll put them, so that the customer always has somewhere to go and not be bored and leave us because they're bored of the coffee.
Sure. So let me ask you about that, because there's 2 ways to view it, right? There's the idea that you want stability. You want somebody to have, like, if they find their favorite, they want to have that be stable enough that they can get it. And then there's adventure, of course. We have blends also, just because we want stability there. You mentioned the input being the best it can be is your focus for the drinks, for the shops, right? That requires training, and it requires that as a barista at Reserva, we'll be able to actually actualize the potential of the coffee. And if I give somebody somewhere to go, but when they, that's fine. But when they get there, it's got to be good and consistent. So if I have it the next day after having it on Monday, I have it on Tuesday, it's got to be the same. So, now obviously you've got 4 shops. And in the beginning, you had a small crew of people, maybe like 4 or 5 baristas. So take me through how you went about, from the beginning, learning how to communicate to people, how to communicate about coffee, how to make coffee, and what that looks like today, as you've learned a lot of lessons in how to onboard, train, and equip people to fulfill the promise of your coffee to your customers.
So I took a lot of our kind of experience in manufacturing and looking at how, at General Electric and Motorola and other places I worked at, how do we train new staff to perform a certain task? And a lot of it came down to work instructions, a series of steps that, has a step 1 and then a step 8 once your product is done. So I kind of took that philosophy and say, all right, cool. So if we're going to train in our organization, we need to be ready to be placing new hires in a position where they'll be successful. And in order to make them as successful as possible is to give them a set of instructions on how to perform their work. We started with I think we call it the drink book of knowledge. I think that's how we started naming our recipe book. So we kind of wrote out, this is the steps to produce in a double shot of espresso. So, dose, clean your portafilter, rinse your group head. We kind of use the 13 steps of making espresso. So we wrote that down, and that kind of set our foundation for pulling espresso. And then we kind of took it a step further and said, all right, cool. We have a standard series of beverages. We have cappuccinos, lattes, flat whites. And how do we perform these drinks, right? So we started outlining the steps. So, grab your cup, you're going to preheat it, you're going to pour your shot, dispense your milk into the pitcher, heat it up, combine it, and serve it with a smile, right? So we started writing all our kind of steps for every single drink down. And I think now we're at over 100-page document. with all of the recipes that we build over so many years, all these years. So, and we have like seasonals in there, and we have like our standard, beverage recipes, and we just kind of flipping through it. And it's a really good guide in case there is a question amongst shops. What is the standard on a beverage? Sometimes, we have some customers wanting it extra sweet or less sweet. And so in each recipe, we kind of go describe like how much less is less and how much more is more. How many pumps of a drink, of a sauce or a syrup is added or subtracted to make that beverage.
Yeah, and I would say that we utilize a lot of resources, your podcast, we utilize a lot of YouTube videos as well. And just being excited and presenting our team, being excited about coffee and sharing the resources that we find. Also walking into the coffee shop with a bag of coffee that we're excited about, that just organically also infuses the team with their own excitement and their own curiosity. And it's really amazing when, the team, they go from drinking coffee to just being, I want to say like addicted, but like they're literally like on every single like note. We had received a new crop of Colombian coffee, and I hadn't told anybody that it was in there. And boom, one of my baristas said like, "Hey, this Colombian is different. It's brighter." And she's like, "I'm picking up, these notes." I'm like, "Wow, that's really cool." Like any little thing, the team will give me feedback, and it's just really cool. I'm excited that they're excited. I'm excited that they're plugged in and engaged in giving us feedback and telling us what they love. If I switch out the batch brew to a different origin, they're like, "Hey, we really love this one, like, can you bring it back?" And, making requests. It's a lot of fun to, just them drinking the coffee all the time. They just become so familiar with the flavor notes, my style of roasting. And then they're also big, coffee shop customers too. They go to other coffee shops. They love to explore coffee shops in different places. And so, we encourage them to explore different coffee shops that, they can compare, our coffee to other coffees, even in the city or wherever they're traveling to.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like they've taken a lot of ownership over it and you're leading by example. Your excitement is contagious and you've got a good momentum. I mean, building that momentum in the beginning is difficult to do when you're starting to just figure things out yourself. And, eventually you get the right people in the right positions and then it multiplies, kind of takes care of itself, I guess. And it kind of brings me to this idea of your expansion. And when you had the one shop and you've dialed in some of these processes, Michelle, you're talking about the 13 steps to make an espresso, or, how to preserve a cheesecake that's been sliced, all the little details, right? But now you're looking to the future and saying we have this well in hand, or we've got it well in hand enough that we want to open a second location, which kind of opens the floodgates to multiple locations. So talk to me about how your second location and the idea to expand happened and why you thought this is the right time to do it.
So we were approached by our alma mater, university. They were looking to open up a small cafe inside one of their new school buildings and their medical building. So it was a casual conversation with them about, hey, like, we're going to be opening up the bid. Would you be interested? And we had like not even thought about opening up a second cafe, but I think we did it more of a, yeah, you know what? The university's been awesome. We got our bachelor's degrees there. I got my master's as well. And it's something I'd like to give back to the community. It's taking a kind of a look at, does it make sense for us? And it might be a good learning, kind of like a step up of opening up a cafe, but not fully, because it is, inside the university. And so I think we just kind of took it as it'll be a good learning experience, and then we'll see what happens. And so we actually got this bid started before the pandemic, as soon as the pandemic started. So we just added like a 2-year delay, what felt like a 2-year delay, just, the building, opening up the second store. But yeah, like, I think once we got the second store open at the university, then we kind of started looking at, hey, I think we can replicate this if we open more shops. We kind of have a methodology of scoping out a location, what are the trades required to open up a cafe, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We have our architect that works with us well in designing the aesthetics of the coffee shops. And so, it's one of those, hey, look at this location. What do you think? What would be a good vibe for it? And so, just getting the collaborative juices running on designing the space. And for us, yeah, what started with the second one turned into a third and then a fourth within like 14 months of each other. So it was a real quick expansion.
That idea that you knew enough about the trades, you knew enough about this architect and the team that you would need to, before it was you, and now you've got a team of people that you kind of lean on. You said you felt comfortable enough that you could do a third location. I imagine the second location just felt right after it was open, like it went well enough that it gave
went
you
well.
confidence?
So, thinking about our, after we open, doing the hiring plan, the training plan, the soft opening, getting the team ready to operate and kind of looking at how, when you have a good foundation of documentation, procedures, policies, down to, an onboarding process, with our new hires, like there's a series of steps that we've already kind of gotten used to how to open up a cafe, and we're just replicating that across our shops.
What was the most challenging part about this scaling process?
I would say that when we were scaling, you obviously take time away from your first shop. You can't be there. And so you're fully relying on your team, your baristas, to maintain the relationships that you develop with the customers. And the customers would tell us like, hey, like we miss you, we haven't seen you. And we would go in when we could. But I mean, you're having meetings with the designer, you're having meetings with the construction team, you're having meetings with, because the university is part of a larger system, you're having meetings with, their compliance, their safety teams, you're organizing with environmental health and safety on different aspects and what you can do there. So we were just having meetings after meetings, and then at the same time I was roasting, which is the other challenge. Is if you're going to be roasting your own coffee, when you're roasting, obviously, unless your roaster is in the shop, you're not going to be there. So trying to stay plugged into the shop, while you're building and roasting, and then just fully relying on the team to maintain the relationships that you've developed with the customers, and then obviously growing the team as well. So it is literally drinking through a fire hose while trying to maintain your customer base at the same time.
Yeah, one of the things I think we implemented in opening up our second store was developing kind of a new hire training matrix. So it looks at, if we're onboarding, obviously we need to have, the paperwork submitted. Once they start working in the cafe, they got to learn how to mop the floors, sweep the floors, how to clean a carafe, how to backflush, how to use our espresso equipment. And then we got into making beverages, making food, how to use the register. I think we partnered up with one of our local leadership training organizations, and they provided like customer service training for them as well. So we set up like a kind of a framework for every barista that comes in through our shop needs to have these basic level competencies for us to perform and be successful in their jobs. And that started with second shop, and then we've just duplicated that for the other cafes.
Yeah, obviously systems are huge in creating safety in scaling, consistency in scaling. And the main thing that, when you talk about having a lack of attention on store one and then prioritizing your time, what I find happens a lot if you don't manage that well is that people start to, like you say, we rely on our team. How do you make that something that's a net positive and not something that people are saying they're abandoned? Nobody cares. Like, yes, we're relying on our team. Maybe too much? Is it the systems that help clarify and equip people, or the relationship that you have with your staff is something that you've been able to sort of cultivate where there isn't this assumption of being taken advantage of as you expand the business?
I would say it's the relationships. You're investing in that, relationship over years. And then, when you grow, you're making deductions out of that relationship. Everything that you try to do for your team when you grow, that's kind of you sort of relying on that trust that you've built up over time. We had a great manager. And the thing is, like, early on, in my mind, I figured out pretty quickly that we were going to need to expand. And so early on, I started with the mindset of like, okay, like, I know that I'm not going to be able to spend as much time in this shop eventually. And so early on, relying on the team and helping to cultivate and nurture their relationships with the customers, because I knew eventually at some point that I was going to have to, be in different meetings and that sort of thing. And so starting that way kind of helped us, because your manager and your baristas end up forming deeper relationships with the customers. And then at some point, you'll need to rely on those to continue. They were more upset about our manager moving to a different shop when she moved to a different shop than, me not being there and that sort of thing. So
I think she took several customers with her too.
yeah, she took customers with her too. They followed her. So if you know you're going to eventually expand, have that in mind and try to build a system so that your team builds those relationships with customers, because eventually, you may need to rely on those relationships to maintain those customers. Stay plugged in with your team. We would do videos for the team specifically as well, just to try to stay plugged in. I'm roasting, so they always see me working because I'm roasting, I'm dropping off bags as well. And so just try to stay as active as you can. Use technology as well to make sure that they see the work that you're doing and that you're trying to contribute, and you're not on the beach drinking a Mai Tai. We would do videos from the new shop to the team to make sure that they were staying updated on the construction, sharing in the problems that we were having. And at the same time, you have to make sure that you are quickly addressing any issues that come up in the shops. I think that's a really big one.
Mm-hmm.
The quickest way to demotivate a team is, to let things go too far before being repaired, or, for any sort of issues. The thing that happens in shops the most is, things go down. And so making sure that you continue that and not letting things. So I think that's one thing that we had always done a really good job of, is making sure that we address issues, as quickly as possible. They have the ingredients that they need to do their job. They have the tools that they need to do their job. They have the training that they need to do their job, the support. In the first shop, we had a really strong manager that you can't say enough about. Having a great manager that could do the job in her sleep. And so she knew that shop better than Michelle and I.
When you're talking, I get this image of a mindset that it seems like you've adopted from an early point, that preventative maintenance is something to be applied to all spheres of the business. Relationships, you're in your videos, you don't have to do that, but you did. You included them. It feels like a sense of hospitality to invite them into what's happening, not just about coffee, to say, hey, you should be excited about this coffee, but then inviting them to that new location work site. That's brilliant. And also just the idea of keeping things working is classic preventative maintenance. But what a good way to view it. It doesn't sound like something you're saying, well, hopefully we'll get to a point where we don't have to do these things, because it's actually your role, what you do.
Yeah, that's what we do. I think we are like our team's biggest cheerleaders. And so if we need to go help them get the resources to go fix the refrigerator, or the turbo chef is down, or the rinser broke or something, we're there to be their best cheerleader. And that's really how I would sum up my role within this organization is I'm here to support everyone.
And in turn, they support you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we've always promoted internally. Always. We've never hired externally for any promotional positions. And so I think people see that. We also promote quickly. And so I think people seeing that, is also something that they're like, hey, I see a path here. They see their peers' effort rewarded, whether they want that for themselves or not is up to them. But that's something that we've always done is promote from within. That also helps give people a pathway to earning more responsibility and that sort of thing. So,
For a lot of people, you'll think about what is the customer experience in the shop, and let's make sure that their experience is great. This is also a great thing to think about with your staff. And what you're describing is that journey. What does the staff experience in this shop look like? At some point, they're going to reach the end of that road, right? But the fact that you are trying to be as creative and innovative as possible within that is the kind of warm, fuzzy feeling you get about a boss that makes you want to stay a little bit longer, right? So, and you're right. People will look out for you, and those relationships are huge. And part of what I seem to remember, and obviously something that has grown for you, is your ability to network in your community and serve your community through not the staff relationships, but the relationships you have with other businesses, with organizations. And no doubt that's contributed to the success of your cafe. I wonder if you would speak to the importance of maintaining those types of relationships also.
I think it's critical for us. That's how we landed our third and fourth cafes, just being able to network out in the community and, partnering up with good real estate developers, or if they have, growth plans, they can, keep us in mind and just be out there saying, hey, like, this is who I am. This is what we do. Come to our shop and, just make a touch point. It might not require more than a 5-10 minute conversation, just getting to know somebody. And so I genuinely love to chat with our community. And if we, I see an event at the Chamber of Commerce, I'll just go over there and just say hi, just to go meet people and just see where things will take, just to know where you might land. So that's always been my approach, just get to know as many people and have people know who you are. And if things work well, it's cool.
Michelle's always been really great at networking. Essentially when that university spot was open, we were invited. And so something triggered the invite, and then our brand and our reputation allowed us to, and our proposal allowed us to win that space. Because if I'm not mistaken, we're the only national brand in there that's run by a
local business.
By a local business.
Sweet.
And doing a great job there, and they're looking to expand. And so, who knows what that'll bring. So once you get there, you need to perform, and then that'll bring additional opportunities. Getting to know your customers, one of our customers is a realtor, and she helped us land the fourth location. And we were just very fortunate.
I think it was just a conversation. Hey, if that spot ever opens up, like, keep us in mind. I think that's all we said.
Yeah. And if we didn't have that relationship with our customer, and she's a diehard fan, that wouldn't have happened.
And if you hadn't had the experience you already had, you wouldn't have ever told her, hey, keep us in mind for a fourth location.
Yeah, you have to keep your eyes open. Our third location, I was driving down the road drinking my coffee, and I noticed that another coffee shop, their roaster was always in the corner, and I noticed it wasn't there. And that caused me to do a U-turn. I pulled in, and they had left in the middle of the night.
Wow.
Yeah, so the space was empty, completely empty. And I was like, wow. So I called, they had a number for the property manager, and I said, hey, I want this space. And he says, oh, you can apply. And I'm like, what do you mean I can apply? I want this space. That was a space that it's in a great neighborhood. It's in a great part of town, but it's in a part of a town that our customers of our first location had always asked us to move
Oh,
further north. So that feedback planted the seed of a location in that area. We didn't know where or what, but we knew eventually we were going to have a coffee shop in that location because customers of our first location were telling us, hey, we can only come on the weekend because it's too far south. And we're like, okay, so if you can only come in the weekend, because it's too far south, then we need to start thinking further north. As soon as that happened, we knew that area was an area where our customers lived. And then we just snapped it up. We applied right away, and we were waiting for them to make a decision, and they selected us. But you have to perform, right? You have to have a great, strong brand, and you have to have a good reputation, because as soon as you put your application in anywhere, they're going to look at, okay, who are you? What does your marketing look like? They'll come in, they'll sample your product, your service, the way your shop
Is the
looks.
business full, right? I know we've had some developers come over and say, hey, like your coffee shops are always like they're packed with people all the time, right? So that's really, you want to show that.
yes. Yeah, that's a great point. And you work hard to get there. You work hard to trust the process. So you think about what you said, Michelle, that, if it works out, that's cool. And that's kind of a passing phrase, or somebody without a lot of experience in trusting the process and being patient that if you sow that seed, that you're going to reap something later on. But being patient to say, like, it may take a little time for that to happen. So you don't just get to have 4 cafes and a roastery in your first year. If you do, I don't know what's going on there, but
We got some deep pockets.
Very deep.
you got some deep pockets, and there's some hard lessons coming up. But where you are now is born from this kind of almost like a trust that things are going to work out if you work on the right things.
Yes, I do feel like that's kind of our outlook and how we approach our growth strategy is for planting seeds. We are looking at what will, put us in a successful kind of series in the future, right? And so we just kind of dangle the carrot out there for us and try to get there as close as we can. And, I'm not going to say it's, butterflies and rainbows all the time. I mean, we do have setbacks. We've had fires in our neighbors, buildings, right? And so we have to deal with, fire alarms, fire trucks and stuff like that, bad weather, hurricanes, no power, Texas winter storms. I mean, there's been so many things that just kind of like gives us an opportunity to grow a thicker skin, right? And just kind of keep at it and say, hey, like these setbacks are not going to like limit us or make us who we are, right? We're going to keep persevering.
Who you are is how you interpret those things.
We learned a lot of that, in our time. For me, it was working with GE. I got to witness, how our company dealt with crises, dealt with storms, how they treated everyone, so we got to see that. And, I always say that we received a $1 million education, and we apply that every day in our own company. So that's one leg up that we have, because we would have had to learn a lot more lessons had we started, the coffee shop at 20 years old, or, we would have, I don't know what we would have done, but I was definitely not ready to lead people at that age for sure. I think about what would have been. So we got a $1 million education. We got to learn all of these things. I think that's one of the legs up that we had. We were looking through a different lens than had we started 20 years earlier. And then we also have a long-term outlook. We're looking at what's going to matter in 20 years, what's going to matter in 25 years or 30 years. Every decision that we make, we look at it through that lens. Is this going to matter? What seeds do we want to plant now for 20 to 25 years from now? And that's how we make a lot of the decisions in our company.
Man, I can't tell you how grateful I am for that insight. That is huge. That is obviously it's attitude that interprets all things as either impediments or opportunities, and the idea that you've been able to just apply that no matter what's happening in your shop. Not that it's easy to apply, but there is a tool for you. is a great testament to, other people that they too should probably kind of cultivate that kind of a mindset toward where they are in their business right now. It's not too late, no matter where you are. I want to wrap up here with just a final question about, keep it open, advice to other people that obviously you've given some great insights here. What advice do you think is the most important at this point now that you want to share with entrepreneurs, people who want to grow their small operation or just start something that's going to be small, but grow it in a similar fashion as you have?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is when we started roasting and opening up our first cafe, like my intention was always to replace myself, right? So I'll go and do something, open up the cafe, be the cafe manager, do some shift leads. But my intention was always, okay, if I'm going to grow, I need to eventually move on, and I need to make sure that who is going to be taking up that role can be in a successful position. So I look at it, can I take myself out of the operation? How can I give them the right tools so they can be successful when they're in that spot? So that would be my biggest advice is, if you want to grow, allow yourself to grow and allow others to grow in the process.
Be honest with yourself. Understand who you are. I personally would not be able to grow this business, with my particular personality. I'm the type of person, I'm a little bit more of a perfectionist type of sort of personality. And so I want everything to be perfect. And Michelle would tell me like, hey, you need to train somebody how to roast. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to buy a bigger roaster. Like, I'm just going to roast more coffee. I'm going to roast bigger batches. Like, just keep buying me a bigger roaster until I can roast huge batches. But you have to understand, if you have someone in your company, if it's not you, that is an operator. Michelle is an operator. She can create a system that can be duplicated, and that's going to make you successful. If you don't have that person in your organization who is an operator, you might need to hire someone to do that if you do want to expand. Because, like Michelle said, she does everything in a way that she can replace herself and pass that work on to someone else to take it over, and then it can be duplicated and replicated. So understand if you're an operator, because not everyone is an operator. I'm definitely not an operator. That's not how my mind works. I'm more of the type of person that wants to try to perfect something, and I go into my, hyper focus of what I'm doing, and then everything else around me is, essentially just happening. So yeah, understand if you have that operator in your company. If you don't have that person, hire the operator if it's not you. But you do need an operator, because you will have a much more challenging experience if you don't have that operator and you're trying to run multiple locations and you don't have systems in place for those cafes to operate independently on their own, relying on the system. And then that operator is essentially fine-tuning those systems to essentially make sure everything's running smoothly. If an ingredient runs out, they're looking at data and they're trying to figure out why. They're looking at alternate sources. They're doing, so Michelle is always tweaking the system. She makes little tweaks on the system, and, little by little, that system becomes more and more perfect, but it'll never be perfect because things change. Supplier will hit you up and say, hey, we're not making this product anymore. So the system's always evolving. They're living documents, and you need someone that's creating those documents, and you need someone that is maintaining those documents, because things change, ingredients change, processes change, technology changes, coffees change, from crop to crop. So yeah, being honest with yourself, and do you have that operator?
That's wonderful. That's great advice. And you break it down so neatly. I haven't quite thought about it in that, you have perfectionist, the craftsperson, then the operator. And this is the kind of thing that, oh man, I hope people listening to this do some kind of an assessment of their cafe and their business to see truly if this is something that they have, and they can take steps to do so if they don't. So this is great. I really appreciate you both taking the time to be on the show. It's been so awesome to see the growth of your company. To hear your story on this show is just an extra treat. So Where can we go to learn more about Reserva?
We got our website, reservacoffee.com. We've got 4 cafes, 3 of them located in McAllen, Texas, 1 at Edinburgh at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. Yeah, we're on Instagram and Facebook, and you can reach out anytime.
Awesome. Well, Michelle, Danny, a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. It's great seeing you again, reconnecting.
Well, I hope that you really enjoyed that conversation, everyone. Just awesome people. If you're in the area of McAllen, Texas, you absolutely have to visit Reserva. Their history, their feel, their quality, their approach, everything is so unique and well done. It was such a pleasure to welcome them onto the show to talk all about it. So huge thank you to Danny and Michelle. Really appreciate you both, and all the best to you as you continue to serve your community and grow Reserva. If you're interested in learning more about Reserva Coffee Roasters, all you need to do is go to reservacoffee.com. And there you will find all you need to know about their cafes, where to find them, how to buy coffee, which I would encourage you to do, reservacoffee.com. If you want to follow them on Instagram, that's just at Reserva Coffee. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback for me about today's episode, I would love to answer your questions. All you need to do is email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. That's also where you can inquire about Keys to the Shop Consulting. Danny and Michelle, like I said, they were one of my first clients back in the day, and I did a site visit with them and coaching. That's the kind of stuff that I love doing. So if that's something you're interested in, again, reach out, chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, that is the end of today's show, everyone. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for subscribing to the show. Don't forget to share these episodes online, especially on social media. If you love Keys to the Shop and you've benefited from the shows, leave a 5-star rating or review over on Apple Podcasts. That also helps the show out. Thanks everyone so much again. And as always, I hope that today's episode has truly given you keys to the shop.